Hello, I am here with Julian Reid of the Entrepreneur Source. He's a coach down in Atlanta, Georgia. So before we jump in, just want to ask a little bit about your background, kind of your career as prior to becoming an Entrepreneur Source coach, and then a little bit just up to this point.
Okay. I was educated as a chemical engineer, of all things, and so I'm obviously a far cry from that these days. But I have worked as a nuclear engineer on U.S. Navy submarines. I've also worked in the pulp and paper industry on the technical end of that for the better part of 16, 17 years of my career. But I also have some previous experience within franchising, specifically working with the staff at the old mailboxes, etc., which most people would now know as the UPS stores. And then I've also worked in the specialty chemical industry, primarily in technical sales. So this week actually marks my ninth year at TES, at the Entrepreneur Source, as a career ownership coach. And it's been a great change for me and a whole lot of fun.
Awesome. Congrats on 9 years. That's phenomenal. I'm working on not my getting towards 9 years with the Entrepreneur Source as well, so I'll catch up to you eventually. But today I wanted to just chat with you about a recent placement where your client was introduced to one of our franchisor members, the Dog Stop, and became one of their franchisees. So as always, congratulations. We love hearing about these stories, and so just want to talk about that, and then also talk a little bit more just about in general as a coach, things that you really enjoy, different moments that you've had, ahas and insights and things. So just having a great conversation. So we'll start with the placement of your clients. So wanted to kind of just give you the floor, and you just want to give us a little bit of the background, where your clients started, where they came from, and their mindset going into this, and then kind of just how that journey progressed to where we are today, where they invested in a franchise.
Okay. Well, very well. My client, Justin Steiner, lives in the Orlando area. He's self-employed as a consultant, and while he primarily serves the healthcare sector, he does so through his discipline of sort of enterprise IT systems and so forth. So he's been a consultant in that space and self-employed for some time. He's a rather savvy investor. And because of that, he was willing to look outside of his existing roles as a consultant to look at business opportunities and franchising. So we connected through LinkedIn, and by means of connecting there, we had deeper conversations into what it would be like for him to go through a discovery of franchise opportunities. We started going down the road, and he looked at least three of our opportunities before settling on the Dog Stop. And it was a pleasure working with him and his wife, Kristen. I should mention that of the three concepts that I shared with him, he had keen interest in all three of those. In fact, to the point where he actually attended not one, but two discovery days. So he really was engaged, and he would call himself a very, very meticulous investigator. And so despite the fact that he's a very savvy and wise and experienced investor, make no mistake about it, he did dot all the I's and cross all the T's with his investigation of the various franchise concepts.
Amazing. And just the fact that he came from, something in the healthcare side of things and ended up with this, a franchise in the pet industry. As you were working with him, what was it about the Dog Stop that really resonated with him?
I should mention that of the other models that he was looking at, one of those was actually within the healthcare space and had an interest in his filled the bill with his previous career in serving that particular industry. Another one was in sort of the HR and staffing space, and of course the Dog Stop was one that actually kind of touched his heartstrings. He and his wife Kristen have been volunteers in Florida, Central Florida, in the replacement or the placement of the old racing greyhounds into new homes. And so because of his heart for dogs and his heart for placing those greyhounds into new homes and his previous experience as a volunteer doing that, they really took a keen, hard look at that. And they also, because again, it's not for him, it wasn't just about what was passionate and something that maybe drove his heart. It was also, for him, it had to make sense in his head. So he did a great deal of research into that particular industry, realizes that the pet industry is growing significantly with no sign of stopping. And so those are the sort of the factors that kind of led him to an investment there, and not just a minor investment, but enough of with 5 locations and 5 licenses to start new businesses there. He's going to have quite a large presence in the Orlando, Florida market.
That's incredible. And I know I talk about it a lot actually with different people in terms of the red thread, I like to call it, which is what I see as when you talk to people, a lot of times there's like a red thread that kind of goes throughout their conversations, and it's really what drives them, like the thing that really makes them excited and like excited to wake up in the morning. And so oftentimes it's, he was working in healthcare, but the red thread is wanting to like giving back and helping these animals and this type of thing. And so being able to connect to that, I think, is really important. And also, I don't know your take on this, but it's not something that people maybe think about all the time. Like, and it's not something that is drawn out of people all the time, talking about what are your values and what is it that you truly enjoy and that you're interested in.
Yeah, and those all played a factor. Now, obviously, one of the other, I should mention that one of the other concepts he was looking at was actually semi-absentee to absentee, and he could have used that as simply an investment to complement his existing income, his investment portfolio, which is rather sophisticated. But this is something that he really wanted to sink his teeth into, and along with that, obviously his wife Kristen has the same passion for dogs that he does, as they've done that volunteer work together. So those kind of tipped the scales toward him going in that direction. And the Dog Stop, as one of our newer franchisor partners, was one that he really liked a lot of the elements. When he met the management team, not only through Zoom calls and telephone calls, but actually in the face-to-face meeting at their headquarters in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, that made a huge difference to him, because he said it reminded him of some previous colleagues that he's worked with as business partners and co-investors in some other business ventures. And so that made him much more comfortable to move forward. So that played a big part in his final decision.
How was that experience with the franchisor, with the Dog Stop? So on your side, on the client side, so you talked a little bit about it. And I'll just say too, it's interesting how different pieces of the discovery experience connect with different people. So for Justin, it was like a big part of that was meeting the team and being like, oh my gosh, these are people that I can work with. But how was that experience in general? Any other more specific details for you and your client?
Yeah, I would say that, of course, at the beginning of the process, my client Justin engaged with Brandon Nielsen, who is the Director of Franchise Development with the Dog Stop. And I would characterize those conversations on the early end as fairly efficient and really just getting a good introduction to the business model itself and what kind of elements of the business model were going to address my client's, basically his ILWE goals. We always talk about income, lifestyle, wealth, and equity. And so that's what happened in sort of the early part of this process. And it was a little bit later in the process that he was introduced to Jesse Kozlov, the founder and CEO. And that's when things really got to become confidence builders, for my client Justin, that this is a venture that he could envision himself doing, growing, and prospering in, and really having a significant presence in that Orlando market. So I would say that, again, his engagement with the franchisors was very good, and it certainly made a huge difference in him moving forward with that concept versus any of the others that I might have shown him.
Great to hear. And so at the client experience and being able to first and foremost get the information, so the education, we always talk about education, awareness, and discovery. So education first, and then heading into that, bringing awareness about the concept and about the things that it can do for Justin, for his family, and then also that discovery experience that's then created. Glad to hear that he had such a good experience. As you were working with Justin, it sounds like he was, very, had these investments, pretty business savvy, already owned his own business. Did anything come up that was like a challenge or an obstacle or anything like that you had to navigate? How did that work?
Well, the challenges in working with Justin weren't particularly difficult. Now, his discovery and eventual placement was somewhat lengthier than most of our clients. However, that was to be expected because of the investment level, of the funding that was required, and some of the manipulation that he had to do with his investments to kind of facilitate that funding. And in fact, the fact that Justin's sincere interest in the other concepts that I showed him had him going very deep into their discovery processes as well. So instead of narrowing his bandwidth, as oftentimes happens with many of our clients, that did not happen with Justin. He really stuck with the discovery with all of the concepts that I showed him, very deep into the, deep into the timeline. And so that had that made his evaluation very detailed, very wide-ranging. And again, even though he's an experienced investor, he advised me early on that he would be very methodical, that he would not be rushed, and would not move forward until he had full confidence that he had all the information he needed to assess the opportunity and how it would address his goals, needs, and expectations. And that's exactly what he did.
And as I'm here listening to you talk about this, and I mean, you've been doing this now for 9 years, it just reminds me time and again of how the client is always the focus, because it's so different from one client to the next. Like you were saying, there's some clients who are going to maybe hone in on one of those models or the businesses that are presented to them just naturally. But others, like Justin, are saying, listen, I'm taking my time. This is not about making a decision quickly. It's not about this very short timeline where I'm just ready to go. I have these things that I need to assess and get the details on, and all these things, where you might have another client who's completely different. But in all those things, this is why I love the coaching, is you meet the client where they're at, and hopefully the franchisor is going to do that as well. And it sounds like that's exactly what happened here, in spite of him taking some time.
Yeah, and it certainly required patience on my part, but as a coach, all I was doing is challenging him on, okay, tell me the whys behind your thinking here. What kind of information do you feel like you're missing that's causing you not to cease your discovery with this particular concept or that particular concept? And his thinking was always sound. So I really didn't challenge him that deeply, because he really knew what he was doing, very business savvy, and he was certainly a pleasure to work with. But it did require patience on my part, because it was something that he had to work through himself. You can't change the spots on a leopard, and you can't change who people are. This was who he is. Came to a great conclusion, and he reached his point of clarity in his due time.
Yeah, which I feel is so powerful in terms of just, even as the coach, okay, maybe you didn't have to, he had a good handle on things, maybe some other clients, but still, you still got to meet him where he's at. You can't be like, okay, Justin, let's go here. It's, very much, again, just meeting the client where they're at, client experience, which, we talk about all the time. So now, just pivoting away from that specific placement and specifically that client, what have been some aha moments for you as a TES coach during the last 9 years, and different things that have really insights or perspectives as you've been going throughout the past years?
Well, over the course of 9 years, I've certainly had a few things like referrals that came out of left field, and written recommendations from my LinkedIn profile, which were really nice to kind of get. I've had some clients surprise me in terms of making their choices to go in directions that I would not have predicted. I've had some clients that were originally looking at perhaps one unit in one area in one territory, who instead sold their homes and moved across the country and went with multiple units. Things like this, they've had their aha moments have actually become my aha moments. Perhaps one of the biggest surprises and one of the biggest aha moments for me was fairly early in my career with the Entrepreneur Source, and that was maybe 6 months into this, when I did a face-to-face coaching meeting with one of my clients with a fellow coach. I was able to see him and how he coached a particular client, because while we were sort of co-facilitating this particular meeting, he took the initiative to some degree. And what I noticed in him was an extreme calmness, asking very open questions that were going to allow the client to really explain who it is that they are, what makes them tick, go a little bit deeper into their ILWE goals, needs, and expectations. And when I saw how calm he was and how authentic he was, and that he wasn't necessarily trying to put on the polish, he wasn't watching his P's and Q's too carefully, it was really just a good casual conversation. Well, that had an impact on me, and it enabled me from that point forward to just take a deep breath and become a little bit more relaxed in my coaching relationships, instead of just being on edge and always on high polish mode, if you will. And that just made a huge difference, again, from early on to now here, 9 months later. So again, those are some of the aha moments, and they've, for the most part, they've all been very pleasant surprises.
We love hearing that. Going back to what you were saying initially about clients who just surprise you like out of the blue. You're like, wow, I didn't realize you were going in that direction, but totally fine with that. And so, we always talk about open mind and all these things, and it's so easy to say it. I talk about it all the time, every single day. With franchisors, you have to keep an open mind when you're working with clients, and clients, they have to keep an open mind when they're working with the coach, and then when they're introduced to the franchisor. But do you find that, just what are your thoughts around that kind of open mind concept for everyone involved? What role that plays in this whole experience?
I kind of go over the top, overboard with the challenge to my clients on the very front end of our working relationship. I mention it in every call. It's written in some email templates that I might share with them. It's on an agenda as I'm presenting business models to them. We talk about their commitments to the process, and I almost literally make them repeat the requirement to be open-minded and make no decisions on the front end of this. I tell them there is inherent value in you going through the early discovery with these particular franchisors, because it's not about the branding, it's not about the vertical industry, it's not about any of that. On the front end of this, it's about the elements of these business models that are going to address your ILWE goals and your needs and your expectations. Because as we get later down the road, if we need to, you're going to have some discovery, some self-discovery. You're going to be surprised at some of the elements of these business models that you hadn't even considered before. And some of them may be very positive, some might be somewhat negative, but nevertheless, you're going to tweak and change your priorities and your preferences that you thought you had on the front end of this process by simple virtue of the fact that this discovery is just that. You're discovering some more things, not only about these business models and concepts, but about yourself and your own goals, needs, and expectations. So they seem to, since I go a little bit over the top with that, they're pretty good about keeping the open mind and about making no decisions. And so that enables them to say, you know what, that was very good, because again, while I don't think I'm going to go that direction, there was this element about this business model that I really liked that I hadn't thought about before. Julian, do these other models have that? I wonder. I guess I'll learn that in discovery. But if we really do need to, we'll tweak the criteria. And sometimes things change with my clients within the time of their discovery. And I always do a check at the beginning of the call of my subsequent calls to say, look, since the last time you and I spoke, has anything changed with you and your family? In some cases, maybe they've put their house up for sale, or maybe the spouse lost their job or gained a new job, and that may impact some things that they might want to do differently as a family. So those are the kind of things that we look at, and fortunately, I think they do see the value, and we just have to, as coaches, make them aware of it and really challenge them to keep that commitment.
I love that you just have it everywhere. It's just very much crucial piece of the whole experience. And it's funny, like even with myself, I can say, I have an open mind, I'm an open-minded person, but when it comes down to it and actually making the commitment to it, things will come up where you're like, oh, nope, didn't want that. But if you are in that open mindset, then just the fact that, like you're saying, that the clients learn things they maybe didn't know before, or now it changes their perspective on something that they thought. And so it just really evolves and kind of shapes the way that they go through kind of that journey. You can never tell them, like, this is what it's going to be like. It's really up to the client. And that's why I love the coaching piece of it.
Yeah, and when I'm sharing this with my clients, I can usually say something like, look, I know that when you start to see some of the names of these concepts before you even dig into learning about the business models, your mind can jump to conclusions right away, maybe perhaps even just based on the name of the business or the vertical industry that it's in. And I say, no, 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 you can't do that. I need you to. And I said, look, I'm a former engineer. I was born left-brained. I get it. I want to go straight to the analytics. But I'm challenging you because I know what you're going through. Suspend your right brain and your left brain. That is your judgmental uh, things as well as your analytical things. Just suspend those and get in education mode. Just learn these concepts first. The analytical and the judgmental will come down the road.
Listen, we're gonna take care of everything in due time. There's no need to rush or make decisions or anything like that. It's all going to take care of itself. But yeah, I think the education mode is actually another really important. Just it's a great phrase. Just kind of get into that. So then transitioning from some of those aha moments over the past 9 years, looking forward now. So at the next 6 months or the next 12 months, what excites you, or what are you looking forward to over the next 6 to 12 months working with your clients, continuing to work with franchisors?
Yeah, well, there's a few things that really excite me about the future, particularly the near future. Recently, I saw a report by the U.S. Census Bureau that said since COVID-19 hit and changed our macroeconomy in so many different ways, monthly small business applications in the U.S. have doubled since that COVID impact hit the workplace. And that is huge. And when you look at the graph of that, it's kind of stunning. That's good for us. And in terms of another thing that kind of excites me about my work with the Entrepreneur Source is we have really leveraged technology in a great way, particularly on the front end of our engagement with seekers. And so we've got some internal tools now, some internal methods that save considerable time in what used to be very time consuming in the business development part of our business. And so that gives us as coaches more time to really do the real work that we have the passion for and the real work that has value, and that is, coaching our clients. And finally, one other thing I'm looking forward to is that with the COVID-19 crisis sort of subsiding a little bit behind us, we actually have our annual conference scheduled this year. So I'm excited about the opportunity to get together with my fellow coaches, and very much excited as well to meet and get to know some of our franchisor members that frankly many of them I haven't met yet, and looking forward to meeting them at our annual conference. So that's a big thing that I'm looking forward to in the next 6 months.
Those are some great things. I'm looking forward to all those as well. I want to say too on the so number one, where you're talking about the number of small business applications doubling, when you just think about all the possibilities there, and just proving that people are still, even with the job market kind of picking back up. And I know I hear, people are, finding jobs that they hadn't before and all these different things. Doesn't matter. There's still so much possibilities there, and people who are tired of that career path and are excited to go into something a little different, the self-sufficiency side of things. That's really exciting to hear. And then yes, 100%, I am very excited for our annual conference. Finally, everyone's gonna be together in one place in person, so that'll be phenomenal. Those are all the questions I have. I will pass it over to you one more time, just if you have any final thoughts on whether it's working with your client Justin and that placement, or just in general.
I believe that certainly we as coaches are challenged each and every day with our roles with our clients. And not only do we have to encourage our clients to keep an open mind, we have to keep an open mind ourselves, and to realize that during the course of our work with them, their criteria can actually change on the go. And I'm certainly seeing a trend with my clients, particularly since COVID hit, that many of them have gotten used to potentially, working from home more so than they ever have in the past. Some of them are seeing the opportunities that they are more open and maybe less fearful of self-sufficiency, and at least exploring that. And some of them to the point where I've certainly seen this more in recent years. I mean, not only literally leaving jobs and so forth, but potentially selling homes, moving to other states, and really addressing their personal ILWI goals more so than they have in the past. And I think they're viewing risk in a much more healthy manner. at this point. That's my assessment in the clients that I'm engaging. Yes, they do see risk in many cases in terms of how they might be investing in a franchise and so forth. But I believe they now have a more healthy view and a more realistic view of what the true risk is, and they're not overly filled with as much fear as they have been in the past. And I think getting through COVID maybe has changed their mindset on that subconsciously, if not actively. So I think the future is very bright, and I'm looking forward to helping more of our seekers and clients explore the wonders of business ownership.
Thank you very much, Julian Reid. It has been a pleasure speaking with you.